community of diverse experiences, faith, and cultures.
Sing with others in one of our many choirs.
Explore your creativity and find healing in the chapter of your life that you're in right now.
At All Souls, our members care for each other through the highs and the lows of our lives.
Live out love beyond belief here in Tulsa, across our nation, and around the world.
Join us. Become a member of the All Souls family in our centennial year.
At All Souls, our members care for each other through the joys and the sorrows of life.
All Souls Tulsa and All Souls everywhere.
Join today at allsoulschurch.org.
Good morning. You can clap. Go ahead and clap for that beautiful music. I was just so relieved that I remembered to take my mask off my face, which I can do and you can't. Thank you so much for being here this morning and wearing your masks. My name is Barbara Prose. I'm executive minister here, and it's my honor to welcome you here in the sanctuary, and those of you who are joining us online, wherever you are, in the country, in the world, whichever platform you're using to join us this morning. As you all know, the numbers are rising here in Tulsa again. It's heartbreaking to witness. Thank you for bearing with us as we adjust week to week on our protocols and procedures. You can check our website, our Facebook. We'll keep our COVID task force is, keeping very close track. Dr. Chris Blake actually usually gives us an announcement a couple of days ahead of the CDC and is always right on point. So we're so happy to be with you here this morning. We have a wonderful service. Shannon Boston, our DRE, has a story for all of us. Sarah Tyrrell is our soloist, so looking forward to hearing her sing. We have a guest drummer this morning. He's not sitting at the drum yet. Welcome, Chad Henderson, a guest drummer this morning. Let's see, what else do I need to tell you? If you are joining us for the first time or you have an update to make on your address or phone number, please use a Connect card in the pew back or click on the link in the chat. And please start sharing your joys and your sorrows, your requests for prayers on the chat so we can lift them up in just a little while. And while our resident minister, Corey Lovell, comes forward to lead us in this morning's Invocation and Covenant, I invite you to rise and to greet each other, to pass the peace, however you choose to do so this morning. Please stay standing.
Hello. It's a small but mighty force this morning. Y'all are beautiful. And honestly, this is about my speed this morning. This is good. This is indeed a day that God has made. Let us then rejoice and be glad in it. And let us count our many blessings. Let us be grateful for the capacity to see, hear, feel, and understand. Let us be grateful for the incredible gift of life. And let us be especially grateful for the ties of love which bind us together, giving dignity, meaning, worth, and joy to all our days. If you'll join me in our covenant.
Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law.
This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. Welcome to All Souls, where we love beyond belief.
From all that dwell below the skies, let faith and hope with love arise. Let beauty, truth, and good be sung through every land by every tongue. Amen.
Our chalice lighting words today come from our All Souls Everywhere member, John Townsend, a poet living in California, whose words the other ministers and I are blessed to receive from time to time. True respect grows from, is the fruit of love. Peace blossoms on another branch. Compassion flowers on yet another. Let us cultivate, walk gently over the ground of love, as we need, heed, welcome others under a deep blue sky of wide open possibility.
Good morning.
Morning.
My name is Shannon Boston. I'm your religious educator, and I have a story today based on a quote by Archbishop Desmond Tutu, who once said, "If you are neutral in situations of injustice, you have taken the side of the oppressor. If an elephant has its foot on the tail of a mouse and you say that you are neutral, the mouse will not appreciate your neutrality." Our story today is called Desmond Gets Free by Meyer, illustrated by Kim Pham. Desmond the mouse lived in the most beautiful meadow in all the land. Every morning, Desmond woke with the sunrise and would spend his day playing in the meadow. And every evening, Desmond would go to sleep in the middle of that meadow under the beautiful starry sky. One morning, when he awoke, Desmond realized that his tail was stuck right to the ground and beginning to throb with pain. He felt behind him, and there was a huge boulder that seemed to have fallen in the middle of the meadow and landed just on his tail while he was asleep. Desmond pushed on the boulder and tugged on his tail. He pushed and tugged and tugged and pushed, but it was no use. When he was out of breath and had just about given up, he saw a gazelle nearby in the grass. "Oh, gazelle," he cried. It seems that an elephant has fallen asleep on my tail in the middle of the meadow. I'm stuck and it hurts. I wonder if you could gently wake him and ask him to just roll over a few inches in the other direction so I might go free." "Well," said the gazelle, "I see your problem there, but you know what they say about letting sleeping elephants lie. I find it best not to get involved in other animals' business. I find that it's best to remain neutral in times like these? Desmond replied almost to himself, I do not appreciate your neutrality. A giraffe wandered by, but she said the same thing as the gazelle. I find it best to remain neutral in times like these. Desmond tried again to call out to the elephant. He tried again to push the... This time, all those voices together, right next to the elephant's ear, were too loud to ignore. I was comfortable where I was, but I'll move over if you just agree to stop making such a racket, the elephant cried out. And then the elephant rolled over just a few inches in the other direction, and Nelson and the other mice helped each other climb back down, and Desmond was finally free. Desmond and Nelson and all their mouse friends spent the rest of that beautiful day playing in the middle of the beautiful meadow. Here ends our story, children. Let us go and discuss how much power we do indeed have, especially when we work together to make our world a better place for each and every one of us.
My life flows on in endless song above earth's lamentation. I hear the real, though far off hymn that hails a new creation. Through all the tumult and the strife, I hear the music ringing. It sounds an echo in my soul. How can I keep tempest round me roars, I know the truth it liveth. What though the darkness round me close, songs in the night it giveth. No storm can shake my inmost calm, while to that rock I'm clinging. Since love prevails in heaven and earth, how can I keep from singing? When tyrants tremble as they hear the bells of freedom ringing, when friends rejoice both far and near, how can I keep from singing? To prison cell and dungeon vile, our thoughts to them are winging. When friends by shame are undefiled, how can I keep from singing?
Here's one stone for the voluntary choir this morning. Volunteer choir this morning. Here our lives flow together. We feel our way forward, flowing through the storms and the tempests, rippling out beyond the raging white waters of our world, resting near rocks, finding safety in healing, cooling waters, taking respite in the echoes of our love and our laughter, taking sanctuary in the singing and the bells ringing. This stone is in honor of Dick Leeser and for his friends and his family. His congregation lost a great soul this weekend. Dick Leeser died early yesterday afternoon. Stone for Jojo Ogundare on his birthday today. Stone for Mike Newman, who continues to struggle for his health. Stone for Dorothy Chakota and her friends and family on the loss of another nephew. His name was Raymond P. Demery. Had cardiac arrest at only 52 years of age. A stone for Stacy Lee and her family. They're remembering her father, Tom Hendren, who would have been 100 years old on Thursday. I invite you now to speak aloud the names of people living or dead who you would like to bring into this sanctuary of memory and light and hope and healing waters, and I will drop a stone in their honor. drop a few stones for the names not said aloud but held closely in our hearts by those of you here in the sanctuary and those of you joining us online. And I'd like to invite you now, here or at home, to stand in honor of someone you've lost in the past year, or if this Sunday is close to the anniversary of a death, please rise and we will hold the silence together. You may be seated. Please join with me in prayer. Holy One, hold us close this July morning, for at times our losses are more than we can bear. And at times our challenges seem too heavy to carry. Indeed, alone our losses are too much to bear, and the challenges too large before us. So we are grateful to rest for a moment this morning, just a moment or a few moments. Grateful to push pause. Grateful to be together. Courageous in allowing ourselves to sink down, to sink into the waters, to sink until we think we can sink no more, until we touch a deeper current than we may ever have imagined existed, that we may never have felt or found before. There is a current flowing deep within us, below us, and around us. In this moment, we feel how this current carries us, how it flows through our veins and our tears, flowing through the rivers of the earth into its oceans and seas. The many currents of our lives have carried us here on this day, have brought us together through all the tumult, all the strife. It is carrying us now. It is carrying us forward as we remember this day that we are the ones we've been waiting for. This and the many prayers of our hearts we lift up in our hearts to you, Holy One. Amen.
We are the ones we've been waiting for. blessings we've been waiting for. A man from Oklahoma, born in Okemah, was not neutral. We're going to sing a couple of his songs. And on the back of your order of service, if you have one, and if you don't have one, I bet you have written them on your heart. Or one of our ushers will hand you one. On the back of your order of service are the lyrics to the song we'd love for you to join with us on. 1, 2, 3, 4.
I'm gonna tell you, fascists sure might be surprised. There's people in this world, and we're getting organized. You're bound to lose, you fascists bound to lose. All you fascists bound to lose. All you fascists bound to lose. All you fascists bound to lose. You're bound to lose. You fascists bound to lose. There's people of every color marching side by side. We're marching through the streets, and we will not be denied. You're bound to lose, you fascists bound to lose. All you fascists bound to lose. All you fascists bound to lose. All you fascists bound to lose. You're bound to lose. You fascists bound to lose. All you fascists bound to lose. All you fascists bound to lose. All you fascists bound to lose. You're bound to lose. You fascists bound to lose. This land is your land. This land is my land. From California to the New York Island. From the Redwood Forest to the Gulf Stream waters. This land was made for you and me. This land is your land. This land is my land. From California to the New York Island. From the Redwood Forest to the Gulf Stream waters. This land was made for you and me. As I was walking that ribbon of highway, I saw above me that endless skyway. I saw below me that golden valley. This land was made for you and me. I've roamed and rambled. I follow my footsteps to the sparkling sands of her diamond deserts. And all around me a voice was sounding. This land was made for you and me. In the shadow of a steeple, I saw my people. By the really far fence, I seen my people. As I stood there hungry, I stood there asking, is this land land made for you and me. This land is your land. This land is my land. From California to the New York Island. From the redwood forest to the Gulf Stream waters. This land was made for you and me. This land was made for you and me. This land was made for you and me.
Yeah. It's been strange to drive around Tulsa recently and see the murals of Woody Guthrie with his signature slogan taped to his guitar. This machine kills fascists. When fascism seems so alive and well, like the most boring zombie movie you've ever seen. Thanks, Barbara. It landed back here. Coffee's in the Day Alliance room, everybody. Hannah Arendt talked about the banality of evil. And I've been realizing that more and more lately. It's the same playbook over and over again, bringing us back to a place we've already been. And just unlike the machine of music that's supposed to end fascism, our resistance to tyranny is a lot less glamorous and requires more of us than any slogan could capture. It's not been until recently that I've come to intimately realize that this machine kills fascism in a way that even in my most empathetic moments, my most ministerial moments, I could hardly have imagined. This challenges us to make decisions, to reassess codes of conduct, ethical lines once thought definitive, to love creatively, not boringly, to search inside ourselves and ask, what might we do to protect and preserve those in our care and our spiritual values all at the same time? And we're feeling the burn of that now. I'm willing to bet that nearly every person in this room, if you haven't already in a short while, will have to ask yourselves when it comes down to it, what will you do? When the Supreme Court decision overturning Roe was officially made a few weeks ago, I heard many talking about how this was the first time that the highest court in the land had actually taken a right away from the American people. And if you look at it from a strictly constitutional or legislative point of view, from a point of view tied not to our aspiration of universal human rights, but to legalese, then that's correct. But if we look at American history with our spirits, our better angels, our creative love, then we must look to 1857, to the Dred Scott decision. In that case, as most of you probably know, a black man who was enslaved crossed state lines to a state in which he was legally free and then sued his enslavers for his freedom. The case wound its way up to the Supreme Court, and in a 7-2 decision, Dred Scott was denied his freedom, creating precedent that American citizenship and rights conferred in the Constitution did not apply to peoples of African descent, whether born free or not. And in the controversial decision, perhaps the worst the court ever delivered, Chief Justice Roger Taney wrote the infamous line that they, meaning black peoples, had no rights with which the white man was bound to respect. And so in his words, quote, might justly and lawfully be reduced to slavery for their benefit. As if it were an incidental inclination to respect someone's humanity and life, instead of a sacred ethical imperative that binds us together in respectful siblinghood. Only fascism could take a covenant and make it a cliff note. No rights which the white man was bound to respect. And one might say the same these days for the reproductive rights of childbearing peoples in America. The vote by an Oklahoma senator this week restricting women's freedoms across state lines certainly strikes a familiar tone. The all but certain restriction of anyone who dares live openly into their sexuality or gender in states rushing to strip away their right to privacy certainly strikes a sadly familiar tone. The Dred Scott decision, unpopular even in its day, all but ensured that slavery would not come to an end via peaceful legislative means. The decision dictated that Black American citizenship would not be won at the ballot box, but would be wrestled away from tyrannical, fascist minority rule via bullets. No more than 2.5 years later, after a contested election, countless incidents of domestic terror, the Civil War broke out. And if I may speak to you candidly, not without hope, but also with stark realism, I say to you honestly that I fear with this new decision recently made and the social and political climate of fascistic minority rule we now face, with the chronic American amnesia of the 24-hour news cycle, with loss of faith in our institutions and a lack of courage and compassion in so many of our civic interactions, I fear we may be headed to another. I don't wish this upon us. I pray daily that we avoid it. But I also have to prepare my spirit for that possibility. And I think we all should. Not just for our ability to remain agile and resilient, but for our families and communities too. Because in these terrifying and uncertain times, in order to live honestly into our values, we have to not just have something to believe in, but some ones too. We have to have heroes. And thankfully, as Unitarian Universalists, we're flush with them. People like Thomas Wentworth Higginson, Unitarian minister in Massachusetts, contemporary of Theodore Parker and Ralph Waldo Emerson. Higginson was a lover of poetry, and for a time exchanged letters with the young Emily Dickinson, celebrating and encouraging her writing when almost no one else did. He was a fierce advocate for women's rights, working for women's suffrage almost a century before it became a reality. And he was also, before 1860 at least, an anti-war activist, protesting the Mexican-American War, rallying for pacifism. He was the quintessential Unitarian. But the times around him became more turbulent. The fight came closer to home. And his values called him into a new way of living. His creative love changed him. After an altercation with armed slave catchers attempting to forcibly extradite a free black man from Boston down to the southern states, Higginson was wounded, nearly killed. They slashed for his throat, missed, scarred his face for the rest of his life. But in that moment, he stared eye to eye, not just with people with an ideological distance, difference of legislative opinion, but he stared at the banality of evil. And it changed him. And his activism went from theory to practice. He supported the effort to create a stronghold of abolitionism in Kansas, including financial support for Ephraim Newt, another Unitarian minister from Boston who risked life and limb to keep his Lawrence, Kansas congregation alive. Newt's church was burned to the ground by pro-slavery militias. His brother was murdered by pro-slavery terrorists. but he stood steadfast against slaveholding fascists in Kansas and Missouri. And he could always count on the support of Higginson because he knew that the fight had to be waged. And Higginson supported allies beyond his own religious community. He was one of 4 Unitarian ministers who made up the Secret Six, supplying financing and arms for John Brown, the Calvinist militant abolitionist who attempted to start a multi-state slave revolt in 1859. Some people call him crazy. I don't think he was. They'll call a white man crazy for being willing to die and kill for the freedom of black people. That doesn't seem right. Seems like the banality of evil. When the Civil War finally broke out, Higginson, once a fervent pacifist, commissioned into the Union Army, leading one of the first regiments of freed black men. Higginson was willing to fight, to die, to kill even, for his values. But one need not necessarily choose combat or reciprocal violence in order to stay true to their spiritual convictions in the face of fascism. A little less than a century after Higginson came another couple of heroes. This time, fascism was raging not just in the American South, but globally as well. Mussolini, Hitler, Stalin, upending a liberal age. And America, in the grip of the Depression, was slow to respond, especially when it came to accepting refugees fleeing the genocidal circumstances created by Nazi conquest of Eastern Europe. The United States even turned away from our shores the SS St. Louis, better known as the infamous Voyage of the Damned. And it was then that the Unitarian Service Committee recruited Minister Waitstill Sharp and his wife Martha. Martha was a highly educated woman in her day, but nonetheless kept a relatively traditional role of stay-at-home mother. But Waitstill and Martha agreed to go abroad to Czechoslovakia and join an underground resistance led by Unitarian theologian Norbert Capek. Martha at first left her and Waitstill's children quite reluctantly. Upon arrival in this treacherous foreign land, she was incredibly homesick and almost certain that her and her husband had made a terrible mistake. She missed her kids. She missed the safe life they'd built, but the courage she saw in the faces of those with whom she was entrusted to assist transformed her. She described the circumstances of organizing a transport plane of Jewish youth being smuggled out of Prague by their parents, who stayed behind to an almost certain death. Quote, "The parents' self-control was marvelous. Smiling brightly, eyes brimming with tears, they waved at the children. The door of the plane was slammed shut with a finality that rocked the little group. And suddenly we were all one large and bereft family." Waitstill would return to the U.S. shortly thereafter to fundraise and rally support. But Martha stayed in occupied Europe, continuing to smuggle dissidents and children out for the remainder of the war, missing her own kids' birthdays and milestones, risking her life even when her friends, like Norbert Capek himself, met tragic and horrific fates. But Martha's creative love blurred lines that were once so stark for her in order to remain true to her convictions. Around this same time, James Luther Adams, one of Unitarian Universalism's most revered 20th century voices, actually spent time in Germany during the rise of the Third Reich. He experienced firsthand the real-time slide from the liberal Weimar Republic era, which contributed to the world stage some of the most incredibly progressive and visionary art, architecture, music, and culture of the entire 20th century. Berlin was where it was at. And it slid into a brutal, extremist minority rule. that even at its peak only represented 1/3 of the German body politic. 1/3. Adams hadn't realized how quickly the landscape shifted underneath him. And he was nearly arrested, which would have meant death, for openly critiquing the Nazi regime. Adams said of this time, freedom of association was being abolished. You keep your mouth shut and you conform, or you get your head bashed in. At this juncture, I had to confront a rather embarrassing question. I had to ask myself, what in your typical behavior as an American citizen have you done that would help prevent the rise of authoritarian government in your own country? And decades after the Second World War, Adams had to answer that question again. The increasing intensity of Christian fundamentalists' use of violence and intimidation to achieve their political and legislative ambitions was becoming evident. Abortion clinics were being bombed, women's health care providers assassinated. The marriage of Christian fundamentalism with Confederate Nazism was becoming clear. And Adams warned his seminary students about this. He told them as far back as 1982, when you're my age, you will all be fighting Christian fascists. And these last couple decades, sadly, have proved him right. We've experienced countless acts of domestic terror, both large and small. From the Oklahoma City bombing to Tennessee Valley Unitarian Universalist congregation shooting, from the Emmanuel Church shooting to January 6th. We're approaching a time when we may need to choose our faith and our principles or our lives, livelihood, and personal safety. Because only once in a century or so do societies face such existential crises. And being spiritually resilient and emotionally adaptable is crucial to survive such occurrences. Being creative instead of boring. Many of us Unitarian Universalists, when living into our daily aspiration of universal salvation, however you define that, when in our quest to remain with our hearts ever open and our arms ever outstretched, bridges ever being built, we often deny or diminish or compartmentalize the reality of evil, greed, authoritarianism, and brutality that lie at the heart of fascist power structures. Many of us simply can't process such a framework because it's so antithetical to our sacred value set. But that's why we need to look back into our tradition and seek out the wisdom of UUs who have come before us and confronted the full reality of evil, stared it in the face, been targeted by it, resisted it, sometimes lived to tell the tale. We need to be grounded in the stories of our traditions past so we can learn from our ancestors' triumphs and mistakes. We need to be grounded in the love and community that sustains us so that we remember the humanity, remember the laughs, remember the look in the eye when we held close the people for whom we will fight and defend. Remember the creativity of love. Courage so rarely comes as naturally to us as compassion. Courage takes a bit more practice and preparation. We don't actually know how we will react in times of terror or trial until we are in them. But when we prepare ourselves spiritually for the possibility of that cold darkness, we are better able to maintain our hopeful flame of bright and warm light. I want you to do me a favor when you leave here today. This is my most Reverend Marlin thing that I'm ever going to do. I ask you to do something when you go home. I want you to do me a favor when you leave here today. Think about the heroes that you hold dear to your heart. Maybe they're household names. Maybe they're just known to a fortunate local few. Maybe they're theologians. Maybe they're doctors. Maybe they're long dead. Maybe they're young and vibrant. But they're the people you think about when your spirit is faced with that terrible dilemma. What do I do? How do I protect myself and my loved ones and preserve my spiritual values at the same time? I want you to find your heroes and print out a picture of them. Print out a bunch of pictures of them, all of them, and put them around where you can see them. Be reminded of them, deliberate on them. On the fridge, in the visor, on your car, on the bathroom mirror, over the fireplace, above the coffee maker. Hang them up like the way there used to be the framed photos of Lincoln and JFK and FDR and Martin Luther King in your grandparents' house, like the commemorative plates that you used to be able to order off TV. Hang them up like that. And do your best to continue to learn about your heroes. Learn especially about their flaws. When were they too hot-headed and stubborn? When were they too quick to make sacrifices when they could have pushed harder? When were they too slow? And what damage was wrought from their ego or idealism? And then forgive your heroes, because they're human just like you and me. And most of all, forgive your enemies. Not just because that's what divine humanity requires of us, but because it's creative. That's how we live in beloved community that we're fighting so hard for. And that's what'll save us too. These are tough times. And they are times that will be written about and reflected upon for ages to come. We will be the guiding light for the generations that come after us, and who will be determined to maintain the freedoms and the community and the love that we struggle to ensure for them. And even if we fail more often than we succeed, if we do it with spiritual conviction, with compassionate deliberation, and with creative love, respect for each other, respect for our enemies, and an unflinching hope for our loved ones over and above any fear of legislative or judicial consequence, then maybe each and every one of us can be heroes too, just for one day.
Wish it could swim like the dolphins. The dolphins can swim from nothing. Nothing keep us together. We can be friends forever and ever. Just one day. I will be king, and you will be queen. Drive them away. We can be heroes just for one day. We can be up just for one day. I can remember with him forever and ever. And we can be heroes just for one day. We can be heroes. We can be heroes. We can be heroes just for one day. We can be heroes just for one day.
You were here on the day that our musicians did David Bowie.
And Woody Guthrie, you're right.
That was
Together.
amazing.
Woody Guthrie
And
Woody
Bowie.
Guthrie and David Bowie in the same service. You were also here on the day that our resident minister, Corey Lovell, delivered a most profound and thought-provoking and impassioned and important sermon. So thank you. And I have a few announcements to share with you. I think that coffee and the book tables are in the Alliance Room this morning. So I hope you will stay for a really important conversation with each other. Please stop by the Alliance Room and say hello to Dale Watts, who has been making that book table happen for 30 years in this congregation. Yes, that's amazing too. Yes. Yeah. Do you know, because to preserve a democracy, the people have to be well informed and educated. So reading is important. Also today at 1 o'clock, our All Souls reproductive justice team is reconvening. We are meeting today at 1 o'clock in room 112 and online. So feel free to join us if you're online. We'll be meeting once a month on third Sundays. There's a lot of work to do in terms of education and fundraising and advocacy and organizing. So please feel free to join us today at 1 o'clock. Mark your calendars. This Thursday is the second Day Alliance potluck. It was a blast last time and delicious. So please join us for lunch on Thursday, if you can, for the Day Alliance potluck. Sundays in August, we will have our Foundations of Unitarian Universalism class. Marlon will be back. The ministers rotate teaching that class Sunday mornings at 11:30. Keep your eyes open for more information. That will be in person and online. And then a few more dates to save in August. We will recognize you, our member leaders, the people who are this church and who keep this church going on August 7th for our Gratitude Volunteer Recognition Sunday. That will be Reverend Marlon's first Sunday back in church. On the 14th, we'll have Reverend Marlon back in the pulpit and our back to school blessing. And on September 11th, we'll have our homecoming Sunday. So please mark your calendars with those important dates. Our offering today goes to the Oklahoma Center for Community and Justice. OCCJ inspires and equips Oklahomans to overcome bias, bigotry, and oppression. Their vision is that in our generation, Oklahoma is a more inclusive, just, and hospitable state for all by recognizing and celebrating both our differences and our shared humanity. If you'd like to make a donation to the church, please use one of the white envelopes in your pew back. You should have a link in your chat, and we will now gratefully receive this morning's offering.
As always, Rick Fortner, David Smith. And thank you. You sounded lovely today. All right, so you guys couldn't possibly think you were getting out of a service that I'm preaching in without random pop music factoid, right? So in late 1987, David Bowie performed the song Heroes on the steps of the Reichstag building in Berlin. It was the very building that Hitler had set fire to in order to consolidate his power and begin his reign of terror. But this performance of Bowie's could be heard on the other side of the wall separating East and West Berlin. So despite whatever restrictions on freedoms existed in communist Berlin, they could hear this music. And it stirred the peoples of both societies to transcend themselves, their divisions, their laws, and to come together no matter the cost. And within a year and a half, the wall came down. So I'm not saying that it's totally David Bowie that did that, but probably. Keep loving one another creatively. Be blessed and be a blessing.